This is Coach On and Off the Court, where we navigate the intersection between business and sports. I'm Coach Frank Knight, and on today's episode, we're going to have my good friend, Coach Gregg Gottlieb, on. He has 30 years of college experience on the boys and the girls side, from Cal Poly to Sac State to San Diego State University to Cal to Oregon State on the boys side, and then most recently at GCU and San Diego State on the girls side. He's going to come on and tell us about his experience growing up in Southern California, playing AAU at the earliest stages, playing for a legendary dad, and then his journey between playing and then pivoting to coaching. And like I said, over 30 years of college coaching experience. Also on today's episode, we're going to highlight an up-and-coming coach, Joshua Calbert, who used to play for me a long time ago at Fremont High School in Oakland. He's now a 3-year assistant coach and doing a hell of a job, and I just kind of want to give him some props. But first, I want to talk to you guys about a book that I'm reading in a new segment where I talk about book reviews. Coaches always usually have books that they read prior to the season starting. I know I do. I read a couple every year before the season starts. I give a couple to my captains. We read them together. But one book that stood out to me that I kind of want to talk about, and I'll put it up here in the box for you guys so you can see, it's from Seth Davis, and it's called Getting to Us: How Great Coaches Make Great Teams. It's a great read, not very long, but what it does is Seth Davis is actually following some of the greatest coaches in sport, specifically in basketball and in football. He covers Krzyzewski, Dabo Swinney, Doc Rivers, Urban Meyer, Jim Harbaugh, Tom Izzo, Boeheim. These are all the coaches that he follows in this book, Getting to Us. And the key theme wrapped around this book is that Seth talks about the characteristics that all of these great coaches seem to have. And Seth was able to put it together by using an acronym which he called PEAK, P-E-A-K. And he said that each of these coaches have all of these things, the P, the E, the A, and the K, and that's what makes them great. The P in his book, the P in the book stood for persistence. What Seth said is all of these coaches are extremely persistent, and no matter what they do, if it's working out, if it's recruiting, if it's raising money, they're extremely persistent in what they do. The E stood for empathy. Seth said that all of these coaches have a brilliant way of being empathetic with the players that play for them. And when he means empathetic, he means getting to know where they're from, understanding the situations that they may be coming from, the things that are going on in their life outside of sport. And he said that all of these coaches do a good job with that. The A stood for authenticity. He was specific with this. He was talking about how the best coaches are authentic to themselves. They're not going to try to be other people. If they are a hollerer, they're not going to be quiet. If they're quiet, they're not going to be a hollerer, but they're going to do what is their authentic self. And then last, the K stood for knowledge. That all these coaches had extreme knowledge. That all these coaches had extreme knowledge on how to be really, really good at the sport. So he said the P was for persistence, the E was for empathy, the A was for authenticity, and the K is for knowledge of the game. It's a great read. You should check it out. I think I got it for like $19 at Barnes and Noble. You can get it. I'll put it up here in the area here. You can get it for like $19 at Barnes and Nobles. It'll be up here in the corner so you can see. But it's called Getting to Us: How Great Coaches Make Great Teams. I want to welcome to the show a very, very good friend of mine, Gregg Gottlieb. Known him for a little over a decade now. We became really, really good friends after he was recruiting a player on my team when he was an assistant coach at Cal. But just to give him an intro, Gregg has been coaching for around 30 years at multiple levels. He's one of the few people who have coached on the girls' side and the boys' side, so I'm very interested to pick his brain. He played at Drake. He coached at Cal Poly, Sac State, San Diego State, Cal, and Oregon State on the men's side. And on the girls' side, he was at Grand Canyon University, and now he's back at San Diego State on the girls' side. So I wanted to welcome you, Greg, to Coach on and Off the Court to my podcast. What's going on, brother?
Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad I got you on finally. Like I said, Greg's a friend of mine. I just kind of want to pick your brain for my listeners. Maybe they want to pick up some stuff that you're saying, and maybe they can, get some inspiration from you. But I kind of want to start the interview in the first quarter. I kind of break it up into quarters, just like we do in basketball. So I kind of want to start with the first quarter. Tell me about your background, man. Your dad was a phenomenal at the very, very front end of AAU basketball in Southern California. So I kind of want to talk about Pops, his AAU program, and you and your brother playing on this ridiculous team in Southern California. So tell me, how was it, first of all, playing for your dad and then playing with the group of guys that your dad was able to assemble on that AAU team?
Sure. Really, the history for me, we always say basketball is the family business. So, I've grown up around the game. Uh, my dad was a college coach he actually was a high school coach initially, and then a college coach, even a Division I head coach at a very young age, and worked for a couple of guys that are Hall of Famers. Tex Winter would be one. Ralph Miller would be another. That was my dad's background a little bit. And we'll get to this in general later, but, coaching is a volatile profession. And he got to a point where, he had three kids and didn't want to move his family around. And so he kind of went into another industry initially. And so he started coaching myself and my younger brother, as another way of staying connected, let's say. So that's really where it started. And because my dad was his probably where his bread and butter was as an assistant was recruiting, and so he used that. We always had really good players in our programs, and I'm 4 years older than my brother. So when I was a sophomore, we had some really good players on our team, and then moving forward, guys like LaRon Ellis, whose dad Leroy Ellis played in the NBA, guys like Adam Keefe, who played at Stanford and went on to play in the NBA, played with us. And later, as I was growing up, or when I was a senior, junior, and senior year, Cherokee Parks, who went on to Duke, Scotty McCorkle, who played at Syracuse. We had a lot of guys on our teams, and we played against some of the best AAU programs in the country. And that was in a day too where you had to be invited to be on a team. Now playing in AAU that's a moneymaker for everybody. This was like there was a team. We were Orange County. That was our team name initially. It was Orange County. Why? Because that was it. There was only one team. There's probably 100 teams in Orange County now, but there was two or three teams that we would compete against in Southern California for the most part.
All
So
right. So, gee, who are the? I mean, I remember Cherokee. Cherokee was a monster. I remember Cherokee being on the cover of the Student Sports magazine. I think I was maybe a freshman or sophomore. He was probably like a junior or senior. I think he was the same grade as Jason Kidd. So I think they were like 92.
91, 91.
Yeah, 91. Yeah, yeah. I remember him being
Yeah.
on the cover of that. So I definitely remember him. Who are any other bigger names that was on Pop's team or your dad team? But Cherokee was definitely a big name. He went to
Sure.
Duke. Anybody goes
Well,
to
like I
Duke.
said, some of those guys, he had guys that gone on in the NBA. I don't know that I have them off the top of my head, but we had, with Doug's team, some guys like Miles Simon played on my dad's team and Miles was, what happened was his dad played coached against my dad's team. The two NJV teams played against each other. And then Miles's dad said, "Hey, I'd love my son to play for you." And from that point on, Miles and my brother Doug they've been best friends ever since. And it was really a surreal moment for Miles to become the most outstanding player of the NCAA tournament when Arizona won it. So, that would be an example. Tony Gonzalez played on that team too, which obviously Tony was a Hall of Fame football player, but honestly, he was the go-to guy on that team with a basketball player. They had Ricky Price, who also went to Duke. their teams were loaded. During both the time period, Charles O'Bannon played on my brother's team, and we played against Ed O'Bannon growing up. We kind of always had this, even starting in middle school. He played on the Victoria Park All Stars, and that was our kind of our nemesis. We'd play against each other. We'd always find ourselves in the finals against those guys. And Ed, actually, who was also most outstanding player of the '95 NCAA tournament for UCLA, but he actually, and early on, he hadn't grown yet, so he was a wing, and they had a couple of big guys on their team, and we actually, Derek Harrison and Al Hunter, when we went to we qualified for the AAU national team in 8th grade, and we could take a couple of guys off that team, and for some ridiculous reason, we did not take Ed, which he never let us live it down. So anyway,
biggest lesson you learned from Pops, biggest lesson you learned from your dad,
sure.
just from coaching, from family, from whatever, just one of the biggest takeaways you get from your dad.
Yeah, I always come back to like my core values. That's like who I am, and what I'm all about. And also what people that I'm attracted to, recruits, all the other things. And then my first one would be passion. You got to love what you do, and it should show. I don't think anyone's more passionate about the game of basketball than my dad, and passionate about helping kids as well. So I think that's the first one. Grit is another one. Passion, grit, accountability, and servanthood. Grit. We just learned how to compete and being tough and enjoying when it gets hard, and being in the loving the, so to speak, competitive desire, and accountability. I think that's a huge thing for me. That when you give someone your word, that they know that your word means something in today's world. I think that's really important. And then that servant, I call it servanthood, but I think someone who's willing to do things for others that without expecting things in return, and all those things. I think when I think of my dad, the loyalty, he was very hard. I think it's interesting. He coached for probably AAU for 20 years, and there were some kids that if they were playing against him, they went, man, that guy's hard on his guys, and he's pretty direct. And which he was at times, but I don't think anybody loved their kids more and went to bat for them when it came to earning scholarships, and he called more coaches and on their behalf, and went to bat for them, and really believed in his kids. So that's something I think I've tried to carry forward.
Great segue. Pops help people get to college. So you ended up going to Drake, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about that experience that you ended up at Drake. And then from Drake, you went to UCLA. So tell us a little bit about that story. A lot of the people who watch this show are high school seniors or junior college
Sure.
players who may be trying to decide where they're going to end up going. So tell us a little bit about your movement from Drake, from Southern California to Drake, and then from Drake back to UCLA.
Yeah, actually, I had an interesting thing because my dad was pretty one of those guys that he pushed us a lot as a kid. And so, I don't know that I ever really knew how much I really loved the game until I really wasn't playing a little bit. And so I was probably a really good Division II player, and, but all my friends were going to Division I schools. And so, that was a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, man.
And so, I was going to go into UCLA as kind of a recruited walk-on. And so I think part of it, though, in honesty, was that Jim Herrick was trying to get Cherokee Parks to come. And the irony was that when Cherokee committed to Duke, well, all of a sudden, guess who didn't have a spot on the team? So,
Politics.
And so for a while, I thought, man, I just want to be a normal student. I'm going to see what that's like. It seemed to be appealing to me because it was, I had been playing so much. I didn't know what it was like to do other things. And actually, my brother is the one that kind of talked me back into playing. And because he was much younger, he always looked up to me and stuff like that at the time. And he kind of reignited my passion, let's say. And so I ended up playing in a junior college event, and was very fortunate that, Drake had a point guard that had flunked out in the summer. And so that's where my opportunity came at Drake. So, and it was a really fun experience. And actually I left there, I finished my eligibility at Drake, but I didn't know I wanted to coach. So I really thought I wanted to do something else, and I really wanted a degree from UCLA. So that's when I transferred back to UCLA to finish up my degree. I only needed, I think, two quarters left to get my degree, and that's kind of how it happened. So I had a really interesting experience though, because I've been at a big school, a small school, been an athlete, been a regular student. I was in a fraternity for a while. I realized that wasn't me. Um, so, and I think the best part about going to Drake for me was I learned what it was like to live in another area and, have an educated experience on living in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And I will say that I had really good experience. Some of my teammates I'm still really close with. I really enjoy, and even if we haven't talked in a while, if I pick up the phone and talk, or we run into each other somewhere, it's like we've never left, and that part I'm really appreciative.
Awesome. Great thing about basketball and sports in general is just those relationships, the networking that you do. Some of my best friends have been because of basketball, and we look after each other. It's kind of like the fraternity, like you were talking about. The theme of my show, as you know, G, is that intersection between sport and business. All of us know that eventually we're not going to be able to play the sport anymore. We're not going to be able to jump or run as fast as we normally used to run, or, we get hurt. And then we have to figure out how we're going to pivot all of the investment, all those years that we've done AAU and worked hard to become the best athlete we can. And now we have to pivot into something different. So I really want to talk to you and pick your brain about what made you decide. You have a degree from UCLA at this point. Pops is a very, very good basketball coach, ex-college coach, AAU coach. What was your thinking? What was going on in your mind, or what moved you to being into coaching? What was
Yeah,
the decision making that you were having in your mind that said, okay, I want to move into college coaching?
there's a great story behind that for me, because when I was a senior at Drake, my head coach was a very well connected guy. He was president of the Black Coaches Association. His name is Rudy Washington. And Rudy said, I know you're going to be a coach. That's kind of probably what you want to do because your dad's a coach. I know how much a part of your family it is. And I said, I don't know what I want to do, but I know what I don't want to do. I don't want to go to grad school because I was just, school was just whatever. I just was not motivated by that. I was ready to be done with school. And I don't want to be a coach. We moved a lot when I was younger. Um, and so the thought of picking up and moving a bunch of times and living like that at the time, that just didn't appeal to me, and the volatility. And so we ended up, that year, I graduated in 95, and I went to the Final Four. That was the year UCLA won it. And there was kind of an intersection of a bunch of people that I knew from UCLA, as well as all these coaches in Seattle for the Final Four. And as you know, if you ever go to the Final Four, they have a coaches convention there, and all the coaches are probably, it's one time that everybody's really kind of a little bit got their guard down and is, very friendly,
For sure.
and it seems like a genuine fraternity of people. And I realized, man, I know a bunch of these people. My dad knows a bunch of these people. They seem like good guys, this, that, and the other thing. And so there was an opportunity that was kind of presented to me at Cal Poly, where they had it was a third assistant, and at the time they used to have a position called restricted earnings, and there was a limit to the amount of money you could make. Well, Cal Poly was the second year Division One. Their first year they won one game, and they didn't have a budget to even have a salary for that position, so it was volunteer.
Right.
And so the opportunity was presented to me, and my thought was, God, that kind of sounds fun. I'd love to go there and see what it's like. And so I got my MBA while I was there, with the idea that, like, well, what after 2 years, I don't want to have, quote, wasted time, but
Right.
if at least I've added value to myself. So I was kind of 50-50 at that point. And, honestly, there was it was such a fun time. That was a great experience. I loved Cal Poly. There's some incredible coaches and athletic department people that have gone on to do great things that were there at the time. I just didn't know it. And that's kind of what springboarded my career, I guess. And I got hooked, unfortunately.
What advice would you give to a up and coming coach? a guy who maybe thinking about, he just graduated, maybe thinking about going into the coaching field. Now that you have 30 years under your belt and you can look back and you have the wisdom, what would you tell your 23-year-old, 24-year-old self about entering the college coaching field?
Yeah, I think it's very volatile, and you got to know you got to make an educated decision um on whether you want to be in coaching and why, and all the things. You got to know what the cons are just as much as the pros. So because you're taking a risk, and I think I'm not, now that I'm older, I see the value in people that have gotten jobs, even working for this government, or working in a police department for 20 years and retiring, or fire department, or people that have stability. And this is not a profession that has stability, and it's also not a profession where you always get to choose where you want to be.
Right.
And success is definitely not in a straight line.
Right.
And so, and I think too, nowadays, a lot of young guys think that, there's the reason they're going to get a job is because they're really good with individual workouts, and they put all their videos on YouTube and stuff. And, they come up with reasons why they think they're going to get a job. And that's not exactly how getting a job works. And it's not how moving along on that path works. So I really try and make sure. I don't want to, I wouldn't tell someone to not do it, but I'd also like question, like, what is it that you really like about coaching? What do you really hope to gain? If you're doing it because you really want to think that there's a lot of money to be made at it, I would tell you that there's a lot of other ways that you'd have a better chance statistically to get to have that, and ask you, are you willing to relocate? Are you willing to live anywhere else? How important is that?
Mhm.
Those are the kind of things that I would want them to be aware of.
Now, I want to split the next part up, G, because you're one of the few people. And I went online and did some research. It was hard for me to find it because there's not a lot of people putting the stats on there. But you have to be one of probably a handful of people who have went to the NC2A tournament for a university on the boys coaching staff, and then went to the NC2A tournament coaching on the women's or the girls side of the same institution. So what I want to do is I want to kind of split it up because I think you might have gems in both sides. So I want to talk about the boys first because you were doing that. Now you're on the girls side. So on the boys side, you were at Cal Poly, you were at Sac State, you were at San Diego State. I think you were under Fisher while you were there. You were at Cal under Monty and Braun, if I'm not wrong. And
Yep.
then you were at Oregon State. Those are some nice stops. Tell us about just some of the things you remember, some of the things that was awesome for you on the men's side when you were doing
Sure.
coaching on the men's side.
I mean, I think regardless, men or women, I've been really fortunate to work for some great people and work with some really good people as well. And when I look back, even like I said, Cal Poly, we played really fast. We went from the year before they won one game. We had the largest turnaround in the country. We won 16 games our first year, and had a really fun style of play. And it was really simplicity in terms of what we did offensively, and played fast. And Sac State, was I got so much more responsibility when I went to Sac State. There was one of two assistants really on our staff at a Division I school, and we just didn't have a lot, and we just had so many things that had to be done. And I really learned how to be a good assistant. I worked for a guy named Tom Abetamarco, who is really a kind of a legend in the profession. He's had so many different jobs, worked for a lot of people, but he was a really good recruiter. And I learned a tremendous work ethic, and we struggled. And so sometimes we won 1 in 3 games there, and there was a lot of things. You realize it's a fine line between winning and losing. And so sometimes you learn just as much in losing as you do in winning.
For sure. No
But I
question.
definitely would say that what really helped me was the work ethic that I developed working for Tom Abetamarco. When I went down to San Diego State and worked for Steve Fisher, I just found a way to make myself extremely valuable. Um, and I wanted to be involved in every aspect of the program without overstepping my bounds, but also I was able to, because I think the way our staff was constructed, we didn't have a lot of egos on our staff. So everybody really um, allowed people to take ownership in the program. And so I went down there, as operations. And the funny part, one of the years we had a guy named Tony Bland redshirting. Tony transferred from Syracuse, and one of my high school friends, a guy I played with, Mike Hopkins, was at Syracuse, and he called me and said, "Hey, Tony wants to go to USC, but I'm going to try and help you get him because I think this is a better place for him." And so, long story short, he was redshirting, and I worked him out every day. And I think this is one of the things that I've always done is just learn to invest in the players. And I didn't do this with intent, but after our third year, we went to the NCAA tournament. One of the assistants, Jim Tomey, got the head women's job, and they had an opening, and Tony went in there and said, "Hey, man, you gotta promote Gregg. He's the one that's doing X, Y, and Z." And I didn't even ask him to do this. This was just him lobbying for me, only because I was just doing what was right. And so,
Shout out Tony. We got to shout out Tony. He
no
back in the
question.
business, man.
Obviously,
We got to
Tony,
shout out my guy. Back in the business. Good
that's
for him.
right.
Keep going.
Tony's was, I knew he was a coach in the making back then, but I think what I would gather from that, and I would tell a lot of these young coaches, because I think a lot of young coaches, when they're on a staff, they start thinking that they're just going to automatically get promoted if someone leaves, and that's just not how it works. And I think you in the coaching profession, it's very hard. It's harder to get promoted than to get a job somewhere else. And I think what you got to realize is your audition, your interview is every day.
Yeah.
Your interview is every day. And if you don't star in your role that you have right now, and you're always worried about getting some other role, you don't like the role you have, which I think a lot of young coaches right now, they're trying to figure out how to skip steps. And but that really is important to me, and I think they got to understand that. So that was something I really did, and I just took ownership. I wasn't worried about my title. I wasn't worried about anything else. I was just trying to, how could I be more involved? And then I really was, and I working for Steve Fisher, who was a great manager of men. And what I would say is, like, everyone's always, well, let's X and O, let's do this or that. The thing that he was so good at was, he just knew what to say at the right time all the time. And sometimes, what a pregnant pause is, right? The pregnant pause is when you take time to gather your thoughts for a second and then
Mm-hmm.
talk. He
Mm-hmm.
was a master of that, and I think it really helped because he never really had to worry that he had to retract some of his statements, or I wish I didn't say that, but he just knew what to say to everybody. And for example, there would always be guys in the locker room after the game. They might not have got in, or they might not have played a lot, or they didn't like their role or whatever. And he would be just like some coaches would say, "Hey, you can't be that way." Well, I don't know if that's realistic. He'd say, "Look, you can think that, but you can't show it.
Right.
You can't show it. You can't walk around with a sour look on your face because you didn't get in like that. You
Right.
can think that way, but you can't show it. That's not what the team's all about." And
For sure.
but then also in really big moments with really good players, and that's not easy. Everyone thinks that, oh, you just get the best players, and you got to manage those people. And he was incredible at that. So um,
Talked
every
about this. I talked about this on my last episode. I'm reading a book by Seth Davis talking about getting to us, and he's basically following some of the greatest coaches in basketball, and he just basically starts to earmark the different characteristics that he saw in all the great coaches.
yeah,
So I kind of want you to do that if you can do that for me. You have Fisher,
yeah,
Monty, and Braun back to back to back. For me, I think they're
yeah.
great coaches. I think they're really, really good coaches. So tell me, what are some of the characteristics that all three of those guys share that make them good coaches?
Yeah, well, I think one is you have to be strong-willed. I don't care if you want to be a head coach, you have to be strong-willed because everybody's going to test your will.
Right.
And you're going to also question yourself at times. You lose a game and you thought you should have won, or you're in a losing streak and you're going to start questioning certain things. But, like, you are going to get your will tested. Your staff is going to test your will. The administration, they want you to do X, Y, and Z. At some point, you're going to say, "Hey, I can do this, I'll do that, but I can't do this." In recruiting, you got all these. It's not just the players it's the family, it's everybody in their recruiting circle, and sometimes they're going to want you to compromise yourself, and they're going to test your will. Your own players, when they're on your team, they're going to test you. The officials are going to test your will. I mean, there's just so many things like that. And so these are people that all have a much that you really have to develop that strong will. That doesn't mean they might have different ways of showing it, but these guys are all strong-willed individuals.
All right, now we'll move on to the girl side. I mean, you've been on
Sure.
the girl side most recently at GCU and now at San Diego State. Just tell me about some of the gyms. I remember when you were over at GCU coaching for Molly. Molly's a great coach, by the way. I've watched some of the film on you guys. She does some good stuff. But tell me about your experience in Arizona at GCU and now at San Diego State now.
Sure. I was in between jobs and we had a mutual agent and he had called. It was during COVID and he said, "Would you be interested in just spending the season here for with Molly at Miller at Grand Canyon?" She's a new head coach, had been a really successful Division II head coach. And I went in actually as a director of operations essentially for the year. And I'd heard a lot about her. And I did a lot of research when I was to try and figure out who is this person. And, this was the days where you got to meet by Zoom.
Right.
And so I got out there and I realized, okay, well, she is a defensive oriented coach. They play a kind of a frenetic defensive style of play. And I kept saying to her, like, I just kind of want to watch where the magic happens. And it was really fun to me. And I think, especially coming from the men's side and switching over to the women's side, one of the things that made it really easier for me was she played a style of play that I wasn't familiar with. And so there was a lot of learning for me instead of me just thinking that I already had all the answers. And I wanted to first figure out, why did she win 90% of her games before she came over here? I mean, and playing in a way that's completely different. And her terminology was very different. And but the same thing I think was where we vibed is those same things I told you, the core values. I mean, passion. You're talking about someone who has tremendous passion for the game and what she does, and so that part was super fun for me. And I felt like we really built that program, and it was really hard for me to leave that team that we kind of had 2 years ago, and they won 25 games with that team. And then when the team returned pretty much everybody, and they added one really good shooter, which really helped. But then to go 32-2 and have that kind of season was really, I took a lot of pride in knowing that we kind of laid the groundwork during the 3 years I was there. But I also learned a lot. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's been where I've been real fortunate. And even at San Diego State, I think we have a ridiculously experienced staff um, for the level that we have. Because right now we have over 100 years of Division I experience on our staff, and
Wow.
I think one of the things that's really differentiates sometimes the men and women is you really have to focus on the student athlete experience on the women's side. I think on the men's side, everybody's talking about, you got to always have to discuss the topic of being a pro and how you're going to help them be a pro. The women still want to play professionally. That's still a factor, but they also want to have a good student athlete experience. And I think uh, Stacy has mastered the student athlete experience, and I think she's exceptional at it. And I think where she and I are really aligned is she really enjoys the relationships with her players. And where I think a lot of head coaches, they have so many things going on, is like they want their staff to get closer to the players so they can help them in those moments. She really
Right.
enjoys being that person for them. And so it really helps her because she's fairly direct at times with the players, but when she's direct, they know that this is a basketball conversation. This is not you as a person.
Right.
And she knows they know that she genuinely cares about them. And so those are all the things that I think, regardless of whether you're on men's or women's side, you can learn from everybody. I think it's really helped me in my approach in general as a coach. And I think I'm always getting better. I think I thought I was really ready to be a head coach, even when I was at Cal and definitely at Oregon State. And I interviewed some jobs, and I really thought I was ready, and I might have been if I got the opportunity. But now 5 years later, I'm going into my sixth season coaching the women. I mean, I've learned so much, and the one thing I really would say, the last two coaches I worked for have really given me a lot more actual coaching freedom and responsibility that I own in games. And not a lot of men's coaches are going to do that. It's just their egos don't do that. And that's a choice for them. But for me, that's been really fun, but it's also helped prepare me because I gotta own that stuff. If I'm drawing up a game winning play and I get to decide who's in the game, who gets the ball, and what we're going to do, then it's on me.
Right.
Um, so those are the things. Or if it's my offense, I got to know when to get off of it.
Right. Right.
Sometimes you'll go down with the ship because you're so convinced that it's not the offense, it's the players. Like, well, maybe the players don't fit this system.
Right.
Maybe it's my teaching. I got
Right.
to. So I think like those are areas where I think I've really gotten better every
Yeah.
year. And man, like just some of the little things that went into winning a championship this past season, the differences that we made even from the regular conference season to the tournament and what adjustments we made, even though they're subtle.
Right.
Man, those are some important things that I won't forget.
So you guys were really, really good last year. You kind of jumped ahead of me, but that's okay. You guys went to the NC2A tournament last year. Did you guys win the conference also?
We finished, I think, in a 3 or 4 way tie for third.
Okay.
UNLV had won the conference 3 years in a row, and Wyoming finished second. And we always felt like we had a team that could challenge for that. I think we had a couple of, sometimes a lot of people tell you this. Mike Montgomery was big on this, but winning the conference title sometimes is harder than winning a national title, depending on what league you're in. But from the standpoint that like that's a long over the course of
Right.
2 months, and you got to play everybody, and there's all kinds of different reasons. You may have someone sick, or you have an
Right.
injury, or you have a random environment, whatever. But it's hard to win a conference title.
For
And we
sure.
felt like we had a team that could do it. That being said, what really helped us was the year before, 2 years ago, we lost in the conference tournament finals to UNLV.
Okay.
And with a majority of our team returning. And when we got to the conference tournament, there was just our team. And I'm sure with all these podcasts, you've probably heard this before, but I think any really good team, when you get to the end of the season, the players take ownership and it crystallizes it for them, and they really take ownership. And this team was no different in that they just decided on they made their mind up, like, we're not going home without cutting down the net.
Right.
And the level of play that we had was tremendous. And and it's so good because right now we're working with our team this year, and we're talking about it a lot because, I would say, you can be tired, but you can't play tired.
Right.
And all I have to do is go back to our championship game. We won in triple overtime, and we were tired, but we didn't play tired.
For
And
sure.
we just were relentless in not allowing us to lose.
That's right.
And so, man, that was just as gratifying as any of the other years that we won a tournament. And the thing that's so fun, and I would imagine this happens for you too, is like, really, now that I've been doing it for 30 years, my favorite part of winning the championship is it's not the feeling that you get, it's watching your players uh, experience the joy that they got when they realized, oh my gosh, the sacrifices that we made was worth it. The
For sure.
journey was worth it.
For sure.
And when I was at Oregon State, we went to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 26 years. And I felt like we were carrying the last 25 seasons of teams with us, the staffs, the players, the managers, all the people who also busted their tail and wanted it really bad. It just didn't happen
Right.
for whatever reason.
Right.
And so, but you felt that like you were carrying that, doing it. They were part of that journey. And same thing at San Diego State this past year. I mean, it was 13 years between NCAA tournaments. So we really, that part was really fun to watch the players look and be like, wow, look what we did. That was so awesome. And they'll remember that for the rest of their life.
For sure. So we're 43 days out, around 43 days before the tip of the season for the NC2A on girls and the boys side. How you guys going to be this year, man? Give us a rundown on the season outlook.
Yeah. Well, last year we had almost our entire roster return, and we had no one in the portal, and we knew kind of what we had. This year we graduated 5 seniors. Um, And so we knew this was going to be a new team. We really like the group that we have. We've had a spectacular summer. Again, this is where I'm always learning. And Justin Hudson, who's now on our staff, who also was on the men's side as an assistant and a head coach, he and I put a lot of time in the summer on kind of developing our pace and our spacing and our concepts, and being really good at with in ball screens, and in terms of how we're going to the setup of a ball screen, and not letting the defender go under if you're the screener, and the reads, and teaching them to make decisions. And what's really been fun for me is to see the pace that we're playing at. We're kind of the players, same thing. We talked about, like, do we want to run on makes or not? And we haven't even said we were going to run on makes, and the players just decided we're running on makes. And so our level of pace is really fun. And so I like our group. I think we shoot it better than we did last year. Our guards are really good. We lost some really good front court players, but I think these ones are skilled, can really shoot. I don't know if they can draw a second defender yet. That remains to be seen. But we put ourselves in a position to have another really good team. I think we're playing a really challenging schedule. We actually opened the season against number one UCLA, so we're doing big things, and I feel like we're doing the same thing. We're kind of setting ourselves up for March.
Gee, always love having you, talking to you. Me and you have become really good friends, especially over the last 5 or 6 years. Um, we've kind of put together an offense that we've been kind of going back and forth with each other on, and I use it with my team now, and it's tough to deal with. So I'm glad I have you on my side in terms of being able to pick your brain and put some things together. But thank you for sharing your time with me, man. Thanks for carving out some time from San Diego, beautiful San Diego. I know you was probably surfing this morning and all that stuff because that's what you beach guys do. That's your home. That's what you do. So I want to thank you for just spending some time with Coach on and off the court, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, definitely want to make sure I go on record. I got a lot of good friends, but I've never had anybody better friend than you, right, Frank? And I really enjoyed not only our friendship, but all the basketball bond that we have, the hours that we spent talking on the phone about everything. And again, that's who I align with, people who have the similar values. It doesn't matter what level you're at. To me, you actually might be on another level above me right now. You got a little more championship pedigree, but I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, G. Appreciate you, man.
All right. Bye-bye.
For my up and coming coaches segment, I want to give a shout out to a young man who played for me at Fremont High School in Oakland, who was a great young man to have on the squad. He's ended up being a great college coach, and I just want to spend some time kind of talking about his achievements. This young man's name is Joshua Calbert. I met Joshua when he came and played for me at Fremont High School in Oakland. He was a tough kid, tough-minded guy who really, really wanted to win. And I kind of saw something in him then that knew he would lead to him being a very, very good coach on and off the court. He played for me at Fremont High School and graduated. He went on to obtain a track scholarship where he ran long distance, middle distance, and track. And then he started to make that decision on what he wanted to do with his life after he graduated. He had a couple stints as some assistants in high school coaching. He did that for a couple years, but got his big break when he was one of the directors for West Coast Elite, Ryan Silver's team in the Bay Area. That break gave him the opportunity to work with some of the top kids in the country. I think he helped develop 2 McDonald's All-Americans with his stint there with West Coast Elite. But he got a chance to work with some really, really good players, including my son. After that, Josh has just been on an upward bound since then. He had a job with Arkansas, Little Rock, took a job with South Dakota, also one with Northern Illinois, and now he finds himself at Pepperdine in the West Coast Conference. Josh is doing a hell of a job. He's been up to our school a couple times recruiting. He knows a lot of people. He does a good job in his recruiting. He has great networks. And Joshua Calbert is going to be a very, very good coach in the future. So shout out, Josh. We see you. Good job, young man. Looking forward to what you're going to be doing on that court, on and off that court. I want to thank Gregg Gottlieb, for coming on the show today and spending some time with us, talking about his coaching journey, the outlook for San Diego State University's women's program this year, and just giving us some jewels, some dimes, and talking to us about basketball and his journey through his family, through his coaching, and all the things he looks forward to this season. I want to thank you for coming to spend time with us and watching. Thank you for watching Coach On and Off the Court. I'm Coach Frank Knight. See you next time.